I am pretty well versed in Motion City Soundtrack. Super inspired by them. I think they're fucking incredible. Commit This to Memory, definitely a winter record.
You're listening to Our Space with Matt Vettese.
I'm really excited about today's show and today's episode because today's artist, Greg of Secret Gardens, did something very different than a lot of artists. And I feel like the way that my brain categorizes music is what made me so intrigued to talk to Greg in the first place. And if your brain categorizes music by seasons, you are going to love this chat. Because here's the thing, right? Like, you have some artists or some albums that you classify in your head as winter records or summer records. And it's really hard to actually listen to those records when it's an opposite month. But what Greg did was he put out an album for each season. Spring, summer, fall, winter. So no matter what mood you're in, what season it is, there is an album for you. He actually just finished his 4 albums. All of them are out now. And we had an amazing chat about the process of making that, about writing summer songs in the middle of winter, and so much more. So I'm really, really excited about this chat and for you to hear it all. If you are watching on YouTube, before we get into it, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button or that bell so you get notifications when we actually do post videos, and you can keep up to date with those chats. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, just click that follow button, leave us a review. That goes a very long way. We interview bigger artists and smaller artists here on the show, and growing the show helps not just myself, but it helps them and it helps you, because the bigger this show grows, the more guests we get and the more episodes we can do for you. So please go and hit those buttons. And I'm really excited about this chat. Let me know what you think about it in the comments, and send me a message as well. Let me know who else you want to see on the show or what other topics you think that we should cover. Now let's get into the chat with Greg of Secret Gardens. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, man.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to be here.
I love your music. I mean, I love that, you just kind of popped into my email and someone was like, hey, go and check this guy out. And I was like, you know what he's doing is really, really cool, because there's something really unique about what you're doing right now that we don't really see much of. And that's what piqued my interest. And it was the whole an album for each season thing that really piqued my interest. And I was like, I have to talk to this guy. I have to listen to this music. And I'm just kind of curious, what made you want to do one album for each season?
Well, first off, thanks so much. That's really high praise. And, I don't take that lightly. It's cool that anyone can have their interest piqued by just the concept of it without even hearing it. Because I know it's very much the same way for me. Like I obviously love this thing, so that's why I spent 5 years doing it. But yeah, so I've always been a person who's been super inspired and affected by like weather and like just kind of my like connection with the earth, so to speak, with nature, you could say. Just there's a lot of crazy cool stuff out there when you leave the realm of your like computer and work and phone and stuff like that, which is a whole nother topic because I'm fall victim to that shit too. But
when you get outside and touch grass.
Yeah, when you get outside and touch grass. But yeah, no. So I've always had this idea because I guess the idea I sort of borrowed from or was inspired from was you probably heard of a band called The Deer Hunter, and they put out like an EP for each color called The Color Spectrum. And that's like one of my favorite pieces of like recorded music in a collection ever. It's brilliant, honestly. And they basically kind of like made sounds made music and sounds that sound like color. So one of the coolest things ever. I love it. I still listen to it often. But I I felt weirdly equipped to tackle something like that a long time ago because I've very much already at this point before like I was in music and in bands and stuff, but I never had my own like projects like this. Already though, at that point, I already felt like some of the music I listened to, or all the music I listened to, really could be categorized as like, oh, I listen to this kind of bands and this kind of music in the summer, and this kind of music and bands in the winter, and their sounds like fit better with that vibe. And there's like nothing like it. There's nothing like when the vibe just matches and the soundtrack matches and everything's just working with each other. So yeah, I just kind of like sought out to do that because I don't know, life's short, I guess. I made the first collection of songs that was the summer record over, you know, various times of a year when I had a moment to work on it, and kind of just went from there and felt really inspired and was like really warmed by all the people's like kind responses and stuff, even though it started out completely small. I mean, I still do consider it pretty small in the grand scheme of things. But it started out as like, hey, this is just my project, and I send it to my closest friends, and I made all these like tracks on this like small like record in my bedroom, and it has this goal. You know, that was like the first record, and then it expanded to like a full album with the second record in the series, and then so on and so forth. So yeah, kind of a long-winded answer, but that's where it all comes from and how it all started. But I've always felt so connected in that way to be able to translate like my interpretation of this season and like what would this landscape sonically sound like. Lyrics or no lyrics, or you know, no rules, like whatever genre it ends up being, like what does that sound like? So
I was going to say it must take a lot of dedication to commit to 4 albums at the conception of the idea.
oh yeah, for sure. I guess I didn't have every single thing planned out. When I started, I knew like that's what I wanted to do eventually. And if it got there and I made it on time, like hell yeah, let's go. But I don't know, I was also sort of okay with like, okay, maybe something crazy happens and I'm not able to finish this for 10 years. Who knows? Um, or ever, you know? I mean, technically, you know, we could all die tomorrow, but yeah, I'm glad I saw it through pretty much to the end, which is yeah, it's nuts to be here, honestly.
How often did you find yourself writing songs for an album or a season when it was like the opposite season? Because I'm curious, like, were you writing some summer songs in the middle of the winter songs in the middle of the summer? Like, how did you sort of try to capture that summer vibe? If so, how did you capture that summer vibe in the winter when everything's dark, gray, cold, you know, but you're like writing the happiest tune of your life? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Dude, this is such a good question. And I've thought about like, oh, what does this seem like to other people if I were doing that? Like, am I a fraud? You know, all et cetera, all these things. So great question. And it's like, I love when people think about it that much because I've thought about every aspect of this that much. So I will say that 90% of what I write, like the initial idea is in this season, like that it started in the correct season. And then I worked on it throughout the year. I had to, you know, record it, track drums over it, mix it, you know, all this other shit that takes the whole year. Um, but there have been a few outliers that I have kind of I've thought of them. I've had the initial like seedling of the idea, but when that happens, I record it and I don't work on it until the right like season. That was what happened pretty much. Like I'll have like 8 bars and I'll get the general vibe of what I'm thinking when I'm inspired, but when I'm at a point where I understand like what jumping off point to start at again when I pick it up, I put it away. I could probably name a few songs I did that with. I know I did that with Wildflower and which is on Everbloom, the spring record. I thought of it. I had the initial idea in the fall, like just that initial guitar riff in the beginning. And I was like, this is definitely a spring song. I gotta like record what I can record, like get the idea out and not actually like flesh it out until I'm in like.
Okay, so you like refused to finish the song unless it was that season, even if you had an idea.
A little bit, yeah. It wasn't a hard rule, but it was also like the later records, Everbloom and The Impermanent Amber. I worked on the like real meat and potatoes of it, or I don't even know how to explain this. Like there was like little ideas, like little sections, but then I took them into pre-production with the drummer I recorded most of those records with, Joe Arrington. And that was like me and him in a tiny room, like fleshing out the structure, adding other embellishments based on like a tiny idea that I had in a voice memo on my iPhone. So I saved it for moments like that when I was in a room with Joe, because when Joe plays, I'm actually really inspired by his drumming and what he does. And it just kind of makes me like think about things a totally different way. And like, oh, what if we tried, going back to this riff here in a different way, or, whatever. There's just, there's a lot of ideas that come from his playing that I saved it for, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I feel like artists bank songs or bank ideas all the time. I do find it interesting, though, the whole like trying to capture the vibe of that season by hanging tight to that voice note and then waiting to kind of fully capture the vibe when the moment's right.
Yeah, because
it kind of sounds like you're trying
everything...
to keep like the dust in a bottle,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say I always give everything the like AirPods walk test, like go on a little walk, and if it's supposed to vibe with spring, it'll really hit right when I'm listening to like the demo of it on my little walk. You test drive your demos and you see how they're fucking, how they're really going.
I do want to know though how you're classifying different songs as, like, what defines a winter song, a spring song, a summer song, or a fall song to you? Just because for me, and this is why I think I was so interested in having this chat with you when I saw that, because I think I think a lot of us mentally categorize certain songs or bands with seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, Motion City Soundtrack is and will always be a winter band for me. And there's something weird about that, because they're this like super poppy, like pop punk fun band, but like I've always described them as that warm hug in the middle of a snowstorm. And that's just the way I think my brain categorizes them. I don't know if that's because maybe that's when I discovered them as a band, or if it's just the comfort in their music being almost like so wholesome, but that's how I categorize them as a winter band. And I think there's other people out there that would classify that band as a summer band because they're so poppy and fun and happy. So
yeah,
for you, what categorizes a winter song versus like when you were making this process and creating these albums?
Yeah, first off, I love that you said that. I am pretty well versed in Motion City Soundtrack, super inspired by them. I think they're fucking incredible. Commit This to Memory, definitely a winter record. I was
gonna say, are they a winter or a summer band for you?
It's funny because like even if It Kills Me feels very spring, Commit This to Memory feels very like winter. I Am the Movie, I don't know. I have to listen to that one again. But it's weird because certain songs of theirs like ebb and flow between those feelings. So it's hard to generalize it as like this band is that. There are some bands though that are like that, which is weird enough because I don't know if the band intended for it to be like that. But for me, just as a listener, like the story so far, I would probably never listen to that band in the winter, just because they're just like a total summer band for me. Yeah, so it basically goes back to like my own influence, I'd say. Like, oh man, it's hard because like I grew up listening to certain bands at certain times, so then that like colored my perception of what this music sounds like. So, but I mean, sonically, like you can trace it, and like instead of just saying that, like I would say that, I mean, just things that sound more cold and desolate, kind of like barren sounding, and are like somber, more depressive tonally, like delicate but like heavy in an emotional way. That's kind of like winter to me. Stuff with a lot of like textures and ambience behind it, I would say. I mean, there's textures and ambience in every like recording I do pretty much, but just stuff that's very bare and exposed in like kind of a minor key type of way. Like that tends to be winter. It's also about the way you sing things too. Like the most winter record ever to me, besides Tundra, which I made, is Threads by Now. I love that band so much. And their record Threads was like just life changing for me. So I what's it called? Like I took a lot of inspiration from that for the winter record Tundra. Um and it's also about the way Casey, the vocalist, like sings. It's very like soft, but like it like hits you heavy. It's hard to explain. But yeah, stuff like that. I would
I
say
feel like the two seasons that are the hardest to define sound wise would probably be spring and fall, right? Because I think we kind of have that like minor ambient winter sad song because it's like, oh, okay, it's cold, it's dark, it's sad. That's winter music. You know, it's so bright, it's upbeat, it's poppy, summer music. I'm more so curious now how you classify spring music.
So it's funny, because summer, like I understand why someone would think about it as like, yeah, that's like immediate, like bright poppy, like jams. And I do agree with that to a certain extent, but I feel like the time when you really feel stuff like that can also be spring, because that's like when the nice weather first starts coming back, and you're just like really stoked off that, like in May and June, when like you can really start like going outside and having just like, you know, it's like those first times when it feels exciting again to like, I don't know, wear shorts or not have to wear a hoodie or a jacket outside, and you can just walk outside in a t-shirt and like things are blooming and it's beautiful. For Everbloom, I tried to capture that excitement and that like feverish joy in what I was doing, because it really feels the most intense, I think, in like May and June. And then it's funny talking about the summer record. I actually been talking about this a little bit here and there, but I do have the intention to actually go back and re-record it at some point, because it was like my first experiment with the project, and I feel like now looking back at it, it wasn't as fully realized as the rest of the records are. Like I wouldn't change a thing on the rest of the three, but I just feel like I have a little bit more like prowess now, and like connection with what like the seasons are to me. And I think I have more tools now to really make it feel like a fully fleshed out full album, that really just like invokes that summer feeling. But summer also gets kind of stale and hot and kind of miserable, anxious feeling towards the end of it. So people forget about that. I have in the summer record initially, I did try to capture a bit of that, because it has its own set of like problems, so to speak. Um, so it'd be cool to just embellish all those ideas, like all the beautiful stuff, all the just like like living easy summer days kind of things and like that feeling, but also like it starts to drag on a bit, and you're at the end of August, you are excited for it to be a little chillier outside. Um, so I think that there's something to be said about that feeling. Um, so I don't know. I think that kind of answers the question because there's so many
Yeah,
factors going into all this.
that's such a unique take too. Because I think for me as a Canadian, that misery at the end of August doesn't really hit because I know what's coming and I know that winter is going to be long.
Yeah, your
But
summers
at the
are
same
amazing.
time, they're great and they're never long enough, but they can be really hot and brutal and humid, depending on where you are in the country, right? And there definitely gets to be a point towards the end of the summer where I think majority of people feel the way that you're describing in terms of that like hot stickiness where it's like, okay, we've just had 2-3 months of like, I'm going to say 30 to 40 degrees. For you, that's probably, I'm going to guess between like 80 to 90. So about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, where, you just have so much of that by the end of it, it's hot, it's humid, it's sticky, and, everyone's looking forward to putting on a sweater.
Yeah, I think I really I don't feel that way like super hard as much people because I mean sweating's good for you. I like getting hot and doing working out and being outside in beautiful weather. Um, but at the same time, like I think I felt it a little bit more this past year because I was on tour all of September with A Lot Like Birds, the band I play guitar for. And it was just kind of like, shit, man, can it get freaking cold already? Like, where I just wanted it to chill off a little bit because the days were long and it was just hot, and we were down south, and that's when it gets really brutal, and it was like it's September. Come on, just like chill off a little bit. Like it doesn't have to be like hoodie weather already, but like just come on, just a little cool off a little bit. And climate change messes things up a lot, and like disrupts the natural flow of the world, so it's kind of difficult. But you know uh yeah,
I,
I'm
I was going to
glad that you
say,
have a nice pleasant summer.
where where are you right now? You're in New York, right?
Yeah.
And so like I feel like we probably have a fairly I'm in Toronto, so I feel like our summers and our weather is like fairly similar to it. But I
Yeah.
do see from your bio as well that you like hiking, national parks, all of that. So it sounds like you're very outdoorsy. Would you say that's correct?
Yes.
So how does that and like I guess getting in touch with nature transition into the music? Because I feel like there's an easy logical explanation. Oh well, the guy likes to go outside and hike and all of that, so he's making an album about the seasons in nature. But like, how does getting in touch with that and enjoying the outdoors regardless of the season play a factor into your songwriting?
I would say, to go more deeper into it, I would say it's about kind of like the meditative state you can get into when like out on a 10-20 mile trail, or like a week long backpacking trip, or whatever it is. um yeah, there's like a certain like amount you get in tune with nature and what's going on. um and it I guess like nature has its own like sounds and ambiences and things going on if you just kind of stop and listen sometimes, which on a trail you will do. But I don't know. I also realize I am not wired like everybody else. Like I grew up with all this music in my brain and all these like guitar parts that I learned and all this like random knowledge about music and everything related to music. And like my when I'm walking on a trail and I'm like going, I mean, it's kind of like a workout for me. Um, or it's at least the most fun I have while working out ever, because I like working out, but like that's like the ideal way to like exercise my body. So like that, my mind just gets going in a certain way where like all the cylinders start firing, and just like sometimes just like random songs pop into my head. And it could be like a little section of a song, but I'll think of like the whole thing, and it'll all work, and I'll try to like capture it later after the fact. On the new record, there's a song called MT, like the like the abbreviation for Montana. That musically, like that entire first bit where the band comes in, all of that was thought of on a hike in Montana. Like I heard the guitar, the drums, the vocal line, like, you know, pretty much all the basic elements of the first part of the song. I was just hiking one day with my friend, and I like heard all that shit in my head, and I heard it like clear as day. Kind of probably psychotic that happens, but I mean, I'm happy that I'm not like that. I'm able to like take it and try to, you know, reel it in for whatever it is. So yeah, I like put that on a voice note. I was like in the middle of nowhere in the forest, and I just recorded like mouthings of all the different parts. And then like whenever I was able to later on, I just wrote it, you know, just put all the pen to paper, or put what was in my head into like paper, but not paper, you know, in my DAW and my computer in Ableton.
I just imagined the scene from August Rush. Have you ever watched that movie?
No, what is that?
Oh, it was an older Robin Williams movie, and it was this like young child musician prodigy, and he got into oh my God, what's the big school in New York for music?
Juilliard?
Yeah, he got into Juilliard, and like Robin Williams found him, and like Robin Williams had all these like kids that he would use as like musicians to basically like make money and like hustle around New York. And this kid was just so good playing guitar, and he would like hear sounds on the street from like people stomping on their feet and like the trains going by, and he'd be like, oh, that's a song. And then he would just like write this song, and it was just super crazy movie. You should check it out. And that's just kind of what I imagine you describing, you know, like I just kind of like heard this song, it came into my head, and then boom, I wrote this song.
What's it called? I'm gonna write it down.
August Rush.
August Rush. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I mean, fucking Robin Williams ripped the goat, dude. Legend.
Talk to me about your new record. I love the album cover, by the way. This was something that really stuck out to me.
Hell yeah. Did you know that it's a real piece of art?
Is it a real piece of art? Like this is someone else?
I could go show you it. I have it in my room.
Oh, interesting. Where's it from?
So I had it commissioned by a really good friend of mine, Alyssa Gursky, who I've known for like 15, 20 years at this point or something. Pretty much my whole like adult life in the music industry. I met her at the start of it. And I don't remember if she started out doing this kind of collage like art, but she just does a bunch of creative, cool stuff. Like she's she lives in Portland, and I don't know if I'm going to exactly get her career right, but she is like a therapist, but in like new fields like MDMA therapy, ketamine therapy, like stuff that they're doing like trials on.
Okay.
Crazy cool shit. And it's just one of the most unique and creative and funniest people I know. And I love her to death. And in the past few years, she started posting more of this kind of like collage art that she would do, like mixed media collages. And so when it came time for this, I was like, hey, like, could I commission you to do something for this record? And like, we kind of work on it together, and figure it out, and, you know, see if we can make something sick, because I love what you've done so far. And I think with some like producing and guidance by me, which is a very like light touch, it could really just fit being exactly what I wanted. And, you know, we worked out a deal, and she worked on it over the course of she worked on it like very like once a week or something. So it was a very like slow but intentional process over the course of like 6 to 9 months. And we just ironed it out very slowly, bit by bit, because life got in the way and we were busy and whatnot. But we would text about it like every week and be like, hey, what if we put the road on the bottom and then these people on top and the stars on the top? And we just went through a few different iterations and came up with that. And yeah, it's a real piece of art. The cover is a professional digital scanning of it, but it's like a 1.5 by 1.5 like wood block with a collage like glued on it from different cutouts of like books and newspapers and magazines and stuff like that.
There's just so many layers to it. And I feel like the first time I looked at it, I'll tell you what I saw. And this is the reason why I thought it was really cool. Like you kind of see the road and there's like kind of like another road in there. It almost feels like there's like a highway into like a subdivision into like the mountains and the hills. But then because of the leaves from above the kid on the bike and those leaves kind of like coming down across, it kind of almost looked like the hills are on fire.
Because, I actually can see that now that I look at it.
Because of the orange leaves. True. So it was like, at first I thought this was the summer album. And I was like, oh, okay, the summer, but like Summer's of Fire. Like that's crazy. But I was like, no, this is the fall album. Everything's nice and orange. But I feel like there's just so many layers to it.
Yeah, in the bottom left-hand corner, you see some of the trees are starting to turn and there's some evergreens and yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, but yeah, I've thought about like color and like color schemes for each record. And so I would say, obviously the fall one is like oranges, reds, amber, auburn, yellows, stuff like that. Summer is, to me, it's very like green, like a lush green is what I first think of. And there's some auxiliary colors that work with it, but yeah, it's definitely summer is when everything's just like a deep, intense green. At least it's what I think of. But there's also like the yellow of the sun and stuff.
Yeah, I think yellow. Green is a good secondary one in terms of like, the leaves are nice and green. But talk to me about this new record, because this is your latest release. So while, we can sit and talk about seasons all day, because I do have a big interest in music per season and different genres or artists that fit the seasons. So that's why I got so excited, like I said, for this conversation. But of course, the last piece of music that most artists put out usually ends up being their most passionate one or like their best to them, right? Because it's like, this is my latest piece of work, and your latest piece of work should always be the best, right? So the Impermanent Amber, what does that mean? At least to you.
The title. So when I was making this record, maybe a little bit before I really started like pedal to the metal on the record, I would say that I definitely, I'm always thinking about names for all of these, because I don't want to just call them spring, winter, summer, autumn, because it's boring, and not deep enough to me. So
like, I'm a creative musician. Like, I can be more creative than that.
Yeah, I can be more creative than that. Exactly. So I was just kind of like, what would represent autumn in a way that feels genuine and like interesting, because titles have to be interesting. They have to pique interest at least. So I knew I liked the words either amber or auburn, which are two fall colors. I knew I like wanted to use those as a jumping off point, starting point. The words wouldn't leave my head, because I was like, it can't be called just that, but that should be somewhere in there. And I was explaining this to someone last night. As I started making the record more, and I'm sure you'll want to touch on this. This is the first record where I'm like actually singing, because a lot of it is like kind of instrumental, post-rock vibes, progressive. There's some vocals here and there, but it's can like be a featured artist half the time. But this record, I had more to say, and so I started developing themes lyrically, and I sing on about 5 or so songs out of the 11, and there's some collaborations here and there. So when I started actually making my own lyrics to talk about experiences that I had that fit under this autumn umbrella, I started realizing a central theme, like unintentionally, which is that everything in this life does not last. Everything in this life is impermanent. Um, it's such a weird truth to grapple with, and it can either scare the shit out of you or really motivate you. I mean, every feeling you've had, every item materialistically you have, every love, every person, none of it lasts, and it's so beautiful because of that reason, and it's so terrifying because of that reason as well. And there's this is multifaceted. The season of autumn, like the ideal like autumn conditions, right? You get it in Toronto, I know that. Like how long does that actually last? That's like
Oh, it's so
three
quick.
weeks. That's like 3 weeks of like leaves are turning, falling. They're gone. All the leaves are gone. Like they're on the ground now. That's like the shortest thing out of like the whole year. I'd have to think about it scientifically. I'm not sure if like spring, like blooming of flowers is longer. I feel like that's longer, and like different flowers bloom at different points of the year. But yeah, like your typical like maple oak trees, when they turn like and they start getting yellow, red, brown, like fall off, that process is not that long. It happens every year, and it's amazing and beautiful, and there's all these ideal conditions, and it feels great outside. You have this light jacket on and it's perfect. But it's super just like a reminder that all things go. So one day it hit me like a truck. The impermanent amber is what I could refer to it as. So that's how I got there.
That's the perfect name, and I think the perfect description. I don't think I've ever heard a more perfect description, not just of an album for fall, but like just of fall in general.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. I've had years to think about it, and that's what I came up with, and that's what hit home for me.
Now, you mentioned that and I noticed this as well, but that you sing more on this album versus the other albums. What's the reasoning behind that?
So it comes down to just I had more to say, and I feel like I have a bit of and I'll preface this by saying like any random Joe Schmo on the street could hear my record and be like, yeah, that's trash. It's not that interesting. And I fully realize that like my stuff is not for everybody. Someone might have a problem with XYZ, whatever. And that's all good. But for me, I have for what I think is interesting and cool, I have like I'm harder on myself, and I never was like super confident in my singing voice, and I sort of still am not, but I've gotten more confident with it for sure. Through the help of like a great support system of friends and family, and also reassurance by fans listening to this record and being just like, hey, you sound great. Something I was scared to do, but I'm old enough now where I can take risks, and I took the risk, and if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. But yeah, I actually had like vocal melodies and lyrics that I thought were like up to par with some of my inspirations on that department. There's a lot of vocal inspirations, melodically and tonally and lyrically for sure, because I know lyrics matter to a lot of people. I am not a primary lyric listener, especially when I listen to a song. Like, lyrics are the like kind of last thing I really grab onto in a song. Pay attention to other things first. But I've learned throughout the years, like, lyrics are super important for a lot of people. So I wanted to make sure like what I had to say was good enough, and up to par with that stuff. And like, inspiration wise, like, I could pull a few. I mean, Ben Gibbard comes to the top of my head, like from Death Cab for Cutie.
Mm-hmm.
Super lyrically and vocally inspiring with the way he talks about stuff, and also just the subject matter of their songs. Like, yeah, they have a great way of like making you feel, but it's not so on the nose where you're just like taken out of the experience. Like, I mean, for like Title and Registration, this whole like lamenting of a relationship that didn't work out, but he starts talking about the glove compartment of your car. Like, those are the first lyrics of the song. It's like perfect. It's like so eloquently put in a way that makes you feel like all those details are part of your life. And I'm not saying I did exactly that and did it to the greatness that he did, but I'm definitely trying to channel that. And I think I got a lot closer than I have ever been to channeling that on this record with the stuff I talked about, and just the way I sung about it.
You know, just because you brought up inspirations, obviously, you know, you're going to have your inspirations as an artist for the music that you write, but did you have different inspirations influence you for each season? Like, were you like, you know, for spring, I really want to pull something from this vibe, or my inspirations from maybe Death Cab, right? And then for summer, I'm going to pull from like maybe Blink 182, or like whoever is inspiring you, right? Like, just
I absolutely did that. Yeah, absolutely did that. For sure. That was kind of like part of the method, I'd say, was like, because I listen to a ton of different music. I'm like super inspired by all different genres pretty much. So definitely like pulled from specific like subsets of bands for each season.
Which bands
I
did
could
you
go more
pull
in depth,
from
but
for each season? Yeah. Even if you just give like one main band, one or two bands per each season, we don't need to
for
dive too
sure.
deep
Yeah,
into
for
it. I'm
sure.
just curious.
Yeah. For Tundra, the winter record, I pulled mainly, I would say mainly inspired by Now Now and Tides of Man, a post-rock band. For Everbloom, I would definitely say Pliny, and a little bit of Pliny, and a little bit like Sean, and also a little bit of like I'm trying to Explosions in the Sky a little bit. The Impermanent Amber, definitely more inspired by like the kind of Midwest emo type of stuff. So like Transit, Suvjon Stevens, even though he's not really, he's more like a folk. I was more inspired by the kind of like acoustic instrument related music. So like
I feel like
Transit,
Midwest
Suvjon
emo too kind
Stevens.
of has a bit of that like folk style too.
Yeah. And then, you know, some of your typical prog stuff. And then Verão, which is the summer record, I definitely pulled still from like Tides of Man, but they have like different kind of aspects to their band. So definitely pulled from a different subset of their things. And then I'm just trying to look at the track list right now. Secret. I inspired by Tycho for sure a bit on that record. I'm inspired by Tycho on every record, but it showed a little bit more there.
I'm going to make you pick a favorite kid, you know, because stylistically each album is different while still kind of keeping your own brand of music. But which season / album is your personal favorite?
obviously that's a tough answer, but it's also especially tough because if I plan on re-recording the summer record, I don't know how it's gonna like 100% turn out. Um, but another reason it's tough is because right now it's the winter. It's like cold, snowy, desolate. Like you want to just huddle and stay inside and like watch the outside, like watch the snowfall. So tundra vibes with me the most right now. Um, and then when things start getting like absolutely beautiful outside and gorgeous, and I'm like driving with the windows down a bit on the highway, like I'll want to play Everbloom. So it's like, I mean, right now
Like it
I'm
depends on the
listening.
season.
Yeah, it depends on the season. Right now, I've listened to Tundra a couple times, but I really do think like from a quality and production standpoint, I have achieved like my best work with the Impermanent Amber. So I am really proud of that, and it's new, and I'm just still like impressed with how I pulled it off. So I will say that.
As you should be. And I think the really cool side of this all that I think you definitely deserve props for is how marketable you've made yourself, in the sense of, you know, no one can ever say that you're just a summer artist and not listen to you in the winter, you know, kind of like you mentioned the story so far, hard to listen to them in the winter. Right.
Yeah,
Although I still do. I've, for some
they're
reason,
great.
earlier today, I was listening to Neck Deep, Life's Not Out to Get You, which is like the epitome of
Mhm.
a summer album in the middle of the winter. But like, you've made yourself that artist now that you can listen to in every single season. So like, I just love that whole concept, because it's like, yeah, Secret Gardens, all year round band.
It's I've thought about that too. There's a lot of benefit to that, being that or known for that, because it's like there's always a reason to go back and dive into a record. Um, Obviously, going forward, I don't know how that's, as I establish other material, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but it's nice to have that like framework laid out, which is a very grandiose concept. So I don't think people will forget about it that easily.
So yeah, and that's another thing that I'm curious about too, is like, moving on beyond this now, is it just sort of like this wraps up the project and now that's just it for Secret Gardens and that's it, and you're going to work on like another project with another idea or concept? Because there is this whole concept behind these seasonal albums, but now what's next essentially for you, right? Do we just kind of like, do we find another theme, or is it just
Mhm.
like, hey, now here's the Blue album? Is it just like, here's an album called, you know, whatever idea you have in mind, just like something that's totally different or doesn't fit the theme? Painkillers is the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. I've thought about this and I'm still actively thinking about it. I have a few ideas that I like. Um, I'm also just trying to like take time and be naturally inspired
Oh, totally. As you
because,
should, by the way. I'm just kind of like getting,
yeah,
my brain is kind of going with that, because you wrapped up a whole concept. So it's like, yeah, sit in that, enjoy that album, and finishing up that project and toured it and promote it and
Mhm.
all of that. That's what we're doing here. But have you put any thought of that into it mentally, of like where to go now that this whole era is kind of wrapped up?
Yeah, I have. I feel still like I have more genres to explore and experiment with that don't have to necessarily fit into a season. Like, and it's okay if the listener does put them in a season and in their own mind. Um, but I like not being chained to having to release music the next time at a specific part of the year. But I mean, I'm not against it. I see and I have seen the point in all of that. But let's see. I do. Yeah, I'm trying to give all the records enough time to breathe and tour them, and I do want to re-record the summer one. But aside from that, I think I like the idea of shorter releases going forward instead of working on like bigger, ambitious full albums for right now. Maybe one day when I have another like solid concept or lack thereof, even if it's solid, I'll put out a full album. But I think I do want to go with shorter releases for a minute. I also love just doing like one-off collab singles with other people that I think are dope. Like I've done a few of those already that fall outside of the seasons. Um, but yeah, I like the idea of like sonically specific EPs. Like this is an EP in this genre. This is an EP in this genre. I don't know. I don't have it all figured out yet, but there's also no rules. I could just like, I don't know, pick a genre of music. Like I don't even know. Like what's a random genre of music? Like polka music. Like here,
a polka.
like, okay,
let's do a polka record.
Yeah, that'd be crazy, right? All right, like, yes, this is specifically just a true to form, like, love letter to pop punk, and that's exactly what this 4-song EP is. Here you go. It's out. Stuff like that. Because there's so many genres I've, like, borrowed from and experimented with that now, not before, now I feel like, okay, maybe diving into them a little more and seeing what happens and like have it just be a focused like, 25-minute record or whatever, short one, and it doesn't have to be this big sprawling concept. That sounds kind of exciting to me at the moment, but I don't really have it so fleshed out. But it is cool to just like flex different like muscles musically.
I feel like that's cool where now you kind of start to get to thinking about what you want to do while enjoying this. To everyone who is listening or watching on YouTube, please make sure to go and check out Secret Gardens. The Impermanent Amber is Greg's latest album. It is the fall album. It came out in October. That is also the one with the most vocals. If you want the winter album, Tundra is the one that you're looking for, but go and check it out. Awesome concept. One thing before we wrap up here, Greg, it's sort of like a tradition on the show. We want to grow the music scene and artists and everything that they're working so hard to do. So who is an up and coming artist, or an artist that you feel isn't getting as much love that should be getting more love right now? This is shout out time.
For sure. Yeah. This is great. I love that you do that. We have some awesome friends and peers who could always get more love. And there are people like I know personally who are like fucking sick and deserve all the support. So we played shows last year and got to be more friends with like Pulses. They're from Virginia. They're so cool, and what they do is super sick. And I always find everything they do interesting. Kind of in that like post-hardcore adjacent, like sort of like progressive, but not like they're more like groovy, funky kind of, but they're not lame with it. I don't know how to explain it. They remind me of the Fall Troy kind of, but in a more like groovy way. Fall Troy is my favorite band. For context, we're not going to announce anything formally yet, but we have some shows this year with Sales Ahead, and they're kind of more of a progressive like post-hardcore band. They kind of remind me of like Protest the Hero a little bit.
Oh hell yeah!
Mixed with like anime music. It's really cool. They're good friends of ours now, and I'm excited to play some shows with them and announce that soon. Also, I'm trying to think. There's a ton of cool people. Those are who pop off the top of my head. They just those two bands just played shows with another band called Cheem, and I don't know them personally, but their music rocks. Like, so go check them out. I think they're sick. There's so many good people. Circus Trees is another band we played with. They're from Boston. They just put out an amazingly good like emo kind of record, almost like post-rock adjacent. Yeah, I could go on and on, but those are some sick bands that I've come across personally in my like travels, and I think they're great.
I appreciate the shout outs, and we love sharing music recommendations here from artists that, you know, may not necessarily be getting the exposure that they should be getting. So appreciate those shout outs and those music recs. Is there anything that we didn't talk about or that you want to promote before we wrap things up?
Like I said, we're going to be playing some shows this year, doing a little bit of touring. So follow us on social media, Secret Gardens, but the word gardens doesn't have vowels. So it's at Secret GRDNS on pretty much all socials. You know, I try to make it fun on there. Not, I try to post either funny shit or interesting shit. So yeah, follow us on there. We have some shows we're going to announce pretty soon. Working on some new like releases coinciding with the record. So like there's a bunch of songs with vocals. I'm going to put out the record instrumentally now, like all the instrumental tracks, stuff like that is going to be coming out, just continuing on the album promotion cycle. And yeah, if you can see us in a city near you, definitely come out. I also play guitar for A Lot Like Birds. A Lot Like Birds is going on tour with the Vol of Troy this spring in May and June, and Closure in Moscow.
That's amazing, by the way, that you're going on tour with your favorite band.
Yeah, it still hasn't hit me yet. But yeah, A Lot Like Birds is going on tour with Vol of Troy and Closure in Moscow in the US, and those shows are going to go crazy. So get out to one of those shows if you can, and just reminisce in the glory of A Lot Like Birds like I do every night on stage.
Amazing, Greg. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to put a link in the description to all of Secret Garden's social media pages so you can stay up with them, up to date with them. Go and check out those tour dates when they are available, and go and check out Secret Gardens as well. Music-wise, please remember to rate and review the show, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment and subscribe, of course. Thank you so much again, Greg.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Our Space with Matt Vettese. If you enjoyed yourself, please support the show by subscribing and leaving a review.